Good evening, friends. Welcome to the second program of World Quality Day. This week is the World Quality Day, and we at Quality Forum we are commemorating this. And today is the second program. Let me please request you all to mute your audio so that the speakers will be audible to you. The Quality Forum is a non-profit organization registered as a trust. Am I audible to everybody?
Yeah,
very loud and clear.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. So, Quality Forum is a non-profit organization registered as a trust under the Societies Registration Act 1860 and under Bombay Public Trust Act 1950. And it was launched in 2004 with a trust provided by eminent personalities like Dr. Giridhar Gyani, who was the Secretary General in those days of Quality Council of India, and Mr. P.V. Narasimham, who was the Director General of Somaya Institute of Management. The main objective behind this humble start was to help the industry both in manufacturing and service sectors to recognize its full potential and be economically viable through better application of technology and management principles in its operations. Today, Quality Forum is a body of professionals drawn from all cross-section of industry in engineering, chemical sector, as well as service sectors like education, healthcare, information technology, just to name a few. As we say, we have a cumulative experience of over 2000 years. That is how Mr. Bhattacharya puts it, because we all are the professional and we are the body of professionals having at least 30 years experience in our own fields. Now, today's program is basically the second program in this event, in this World Quality Week. The first program was for general public, and today's program is basically for the industry experts, by the industry experts. It's more of technical. The first program was for general public. This is for the professionals. Those who are practicing professionals will be benefited by today's program. So today we have a lot of quality speakers from cross section of industries, and they will be talking about their experiences and the sustainability in general.
So Mr. Sadhguru Kulkarni retired as the President Technology and Innovation at Hindalco, which is a flagship company of the Aditya Birla Group. Mr. Kulkarni was also responsible for initiating and driving the sustainability initiatives in Hindalco. In addition to starting sustainability reporting in Aditya Birla Group, Mr. Kulkarni worked on getting acceptability for such work ahead of other peers through the project activities, leading to a value generation through sustainability. Prior to that, he worked in Aditya Birla Group corporate office as Vice President Technology and was jointly responsible for setting up a group-level Science and Technology Center. He has worked at Hindustan Unilever. He has worked at Hindustan Unilever's research center for 20 years and was instrumental in taking many processes from lab to plant. He is a rank holder chemical engineer from UD City, presently ICT, Mumbai, and presently operates as a consultant in the areas of process science, engineering, and sustainable manufacturing business, as well as the business transformation. I request Mr. Kulkarni to kindly share his talk on case studies that he has implemented while making the manufacturing process more sustainable.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah. I think there are some other people who are also on, so I am not able to get the speaker view, but that's fine with me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me start. Thank you, Shiv Kumar, Bujle, Mr. Bhattacharya, and other organizers for inviting me to this important forum. In fact, I am not directly related to quality, but what I realized was the last 2 years of experiences have shaken up our basic assumptions about the way to operate. The first one, of course, is the pandemic, and the pandemic has actually shaken up our assumptions. We cannot take things for granted. The businesses which were profitable or people friendly or planet friendly are actually no more remaining like that. The second one, which is as important and probably more important, is the climate change. The effects of climate change, which we have seen in last decade, but more prominently in last 2 years worldwide, have taught us that change is the only constant that we'll have in the world henceforth. Businesses will get shaken up by our forces. The 3 P's of sustainability, the 3 pillars of sustainability, which are the planet, the people, and the profit, may or may not continue to remain in the favor of the business. I have seen in last 2 years cases of businesses which have gone bankrupt because of the pressures of climate change. I have seen that people have been fleeting. You have to learn to operate the plants, the manufacturing services without people or with minimal number of people. And the result in terms of profit is it can go from black to red anytime. So we have to learn newer ways of working, newer ways of operating. And in fact, sustainability pressures are giving us a new drive to see how we survive under these conditions. In my experience, such change is not impossible. In fact, such change is what can make us rise again in a very successful way. And what I'm going to do is share 2 cases from my 40 plus years of experience about how sustainability pressures made us look at our own processes, the quality of our processes in a different way and come out successful. Let me start by sharing. Sharing some of the work that I would like you to tell about. Is the slide visible?
Yeah, it's visible. Yeah, it's visible.
And is the voice okay? Hello?
You are loud and clear.
Okay, fine. So I will tell you about my experience in 2 areas. I spent almost 20 years at Aditya Birla Group. And Aditya Birla Group is commodity business. It makes products the conventional way. It makes commodity products which are not fancy, which are not basically, they don't need heavy marketing. The products are of daily requirement. And one of the products is copper metal. We had about 10 years back the experience of how pressure from sustainability can shake up our business, can challenge our business. Let me tell you about it. Copper is basically the second largest non-ferrous metal that is traded next to aluminium, and probably third largest next to iron and copper. It's a commodity metal. It is produced at close to 1.2 million tons in India, and globally it is almost 20 million tons. You know that copper is a metal that is used in daily life. Now you use entire electricity transmission, large scale and even domestic, is based on copper metal. You use copper in many other applications, and it is a metal which is ancient. It's more than it is one of the first metal that humans produced in starting from the Bronze Age. Bronze actually is an alloy of copper. It is made starting with copper ore, copper concentrate, which copper ore which has only 1% copper. So you can imagine that when you recover 1% copper from a mineral, the remaining 99% goes back. It is a burden to the environment. In fact, copper production, which typically goes through starting with mineral, concentrating it to make copper concentrate, 30% copper, going through a process pyrometallurgy, electro-refining to make the copper rods or copper plates or whatever, and then converting them into products. It is a highly unsustainable process. It actually has significant impact on two P's, the planet and the people. And of course, it has a very positive impact on the profit. It's a business which operates with close to 15% margin. And this business was the workhorse of one of the group companies in Aditya Birla Group. About a decade back, he started facing pressure because of the two P's, people and planet. The reason was like this. The reason is this. When you make copper, starting from something like 1% copper, the waste coming from the process, it is hazardous waste. In fact, typical copper plant, outside the copper plant or the boundary of the copper plant, you can see mountains of waste collected and just dumped over there. In the earlier days, people used to dump as such. Now, because of the demand from Pollution Control Board, people actually dump this waste in secure landfills, polymer lined landfills. But it is a liability all the same. In fact, the aqueous effluent that comes is rich in arsenic, and that becomes a bigger problem. The solid waste that is collected over the year, the mountain that I talked about, it typically contains 1 to 1.5% copper. It's a value loss. Its arsenic content makes it hazardous. And while it is landfill, there is a risk of it leaching out to the groundwater and causing problems in the society at large. That is the pressure that people feel. In fact, you people might have heard about one of the big copper smelter in South India, in Tuticorin, facing it was in news about 2 years back because of major agitation. People made it close down, and it is still closed down for last over 5 years now. Similar threat was faced by Hindalco, and there is a question about whether the plant will survive despite all these problems. The major problem being the liquid effluent generated and hazardous waste landfill. This plant incidentally generates close to 40% of the turnover of the company with a 15% margin. And a plant like this closing down would put a lot of pressure on the company. And that is how the problem came to us. What do? Here are the threats. You have sulfur dioxide gas coming out of the plant. You have liquid effluent which contains arsenic, and finally you are storing it as mountains of hazardous solid waste, which can actually force you close down. And as I said, the threat of agitation, threat of plant closure, pressure from Pollution Control Board and all that. As head of R&D and technology, it came to us, and we decided that we will not let the plant close down because of a technical problem, a problem where copper is lost, arsenic is lost, or it becomes a liability. I will not go through the technical details of what we did, but we looked at a number of options. We looked at potential processes which can help us, I would say, eliminate the effluent, not only take care of the waste, but eliminate the effluent. And we finally came out with a process for sequential controlled precipitation of copper and arsenic from the effluent. This process is patented, and it gave us a host of advantages. It gave us advantage in terms of the standard parameters of quality of a plant. Capacity actually increased by 1.5%. Quality, the effluent quality became acceptable. Cost, because it actually recovered material worth close to 300 crore rupees. It has potential to recover material worth 300 crore rupees. And it saved on capital. It became a superior process. The entire water that was otherwise going to the effluent and was the cause of a problem became amenable to recycle and reuse, because you have already separated the copper and arsenic. In fact, the copper which was there in the effluent was recovered at close to 95%. Only 5% of the copper at 1 ppm finally went to the effluent. This copper was recycled. The copper was actually recycled to the plant for recovery. Arsenic waste, because copper was recovered, the amount of solid that was generated was only 5% of what it was earlier. Only 5%, 128. And because this process generates some gypsum because of acid neutralization, without arsenic and with low level of copper, it became a source of material for the cement plants. In fact, looking at what was done to get a superior process, the company asked us to look at all waste in the plant, in copper plant, as well as across the manufacturing, as a resource. How can we use waste as a resource? And more than 12 projects started based on waste as a resource. Working on a problem which was lying unsolved for more than 15 years. Incidentally, this problem is not only our problem, this is the problem for all copper manufacturers worldwide. And it became a better 3P performance of the plant. And this process gave us social license to operate. The plant is located near Dahej, which is coastal, and the locality is basically fishermen who were agitating, who had a lot of problems. And after resolving this problem, it became a win-win. What did we learn from this exercise? Do not take things for granted, because nobody in the world is operating a copper plant which is not generating hazardous solid waste. Don't assume that that is required. In fact, you question the assumptions. Convert the problems into opportunities, and opportunities are there if you think out of box. Look at waste as a resource, and I think after this, McKinsey has started a big program looking at mineral waste as a resource for entire mineral production line. Technology, which is the tool most of us use, you can deploy diligently to develop solutions. And rather than living with pollution control board limitations, pollution control board pressures, or social pressures, you can redefine your processes and earn social license to operate. Now, that is what the quality of process should be. And I'll come to this toward the end of my talk. The second example, now people actually say, sometimes say that mineral processing or metals has been a traditional business, and there are problems with which people are living with. So maybe it was relatively easier to take up this challenge because it was a problem which was unsolved. But I'm going to share a second problem, which is actually from my alma mater company, Levers, and it is actually in a product area which is very simple, very conventional, very familiar, which is making detergent powders. Now, all of us know more than 15-20 years back, detergent powder actually meant something like a fluffy, light, easy dissolving blue colored powder which you would get served inside a box. And that is what it was. How is it made? It is very interesting, and you will like to know that a very simple process where you start with some liquid, a small amount of liquid, which is the surfactant, a number of solids. You actually go through the process where all these are dissolved in water, make a slurry or a solution. Very straightforward process. And now that you have made a slurry or a solution, you have to dry it. So use a large spray dryers. A spray dryer at certain capacity is going to the height of 10 to 12 meters. Energy intensive process. You evaporate the water, get the product in the form of the standard light, fluffy blue colored powder, and then go for packaging in cartons, which sometimes cost maybe 10 to 15% of the cost of the powder itself. This is how the process was. You can see that what you are actually making is starting with powders, starting with solids, and going through a process to get back a solid powder. Why? Nobody has had a question. In fact, the question didn't come from my company. It came from a Japanese producer to start with. And the question that was asked was, do we need to dissolve and dry at all? When we are starting with powders, why can't we simply do something whereby you can mix up and generate the same performance without drying? That will probably save on energy, that will save on dissolution process. And what came out finally is one of the most sustainable and one of the most sustainable processes that I have come across. You start with, what do you want to do? You want to basically do a reaction and mix together all the powder ingredients, various ingredients at various levels. But mixing up powder is a technology problem, not a sustainability problem. But what was done finally was use a large, intense powder mixer. You take the powders in the mixer, add your liquid, conduct the reaction under conditions which will facilitate the reaction in a solid form, and just pack it. So the entire plant, the large size plant, 3 to 4 levels of plant, a fired heater and everything was then replaced by a simple high intensity powder mixer and a packaging line. And the advantage was you got a powder which was compact. It actually had powder density which was less than 50% of the powder density here. Now, did it work? There is a question about how this powder can work as good as the dry, fluffy blue colored powder. Once you know that you have to mix up all the ingredients and they will use in a particular way, you can design the mixing process in a way where you can design the particle for performance. Those materials which you want to dissolve first can be charged in the end. Those materials which you want to perform in the end, you can add in the beginning. For example, when you do the detergent based washing process, you need first something to treat the water. So those ingredients come last in the particles. Ingredients like perfume, like the brighteners, they come in the beginning because they are the ones to be released last from the powder. Basically, a compact powder is a superior product, and that is where the quality comes. Rather than mixing up everything together and getting the perfume, the brightener, and phosphates all together. Here we have a product which is designed for performance. It is a superior product. It actually gives you better performance in terms of all the three P's, and that is how a problem, which was actually not a problem, it was simply a challenge, that became one of the most sustainable technologies for detergent manufacturers. In fact, the process became so important that instead of going through a liquid phase, you can conduct reactions in the solid phase. It became so important that we looked at where else we can use it. And I'll go to the learning part of it. Number one, question the status quo. And that is always the point to start with for all technical and sustainability questions. Redesign your plant, redesign your process with a purpose. Now, there was a very clear purpose in this case to eliminate all the factors which cause higher energy, higher material, higher environmental impact, and then use these basic requirements to design your products and processes. In fact, 3P should be used to choose and maneuver technology. Last point is the quality of process is as important as the quality of the product. And that was achieved very elegantly in both these examples. Now, can I generalize from this? Can I use, what are my learnings from this to apply to everybody else's problems? And I'll come to the tool that we are using, we have developed and we are using in my company and many other companies now to understand how we should do it. Number one is, rather than telling that make your processes sustainable, look at the building blocks, look at what in your process or your product affect the planet, affect the people, affect the profit. Actually, there are building blocks, and I given here around 12 of them, which are classified into these 3 P's. These are, for example, in case of planet, I actually look at the material ratio to make 1 ton of my product or 1 kg of my product. How much material am I actually processing? Now, I have put these as a radar chart or a spider map, where I try to put a score to my material ratio. And this is based on subjective and objective data. For example, material ratio put here at 7 actually tells that you are more than 50% of, basically you are on a higher side. And anything you do to reduce your material ratio, which means reduce waste or use a richer resource or whatever, will improve this score. Similarly, waste, water, even land. Land is a very precious resource in India, and many plants actually suffer because of the land intensity. So you quantify these. Use your judgment of circular economy. In case of aluminium, for example, I can tell you that the potential of aluminium to infinitely recycle became a major advantage in terms of justifying the manufacture of an environmentally intensive process. Don't look only at your process, also look at the life cycle impact of your product. Look at energy intensity, environmental impact. Similarly, in terms of people, look at people safety. Are your processes and products safe to people? Also, your own people and societal impact. Are they safe for the surrounding? The CSR factor that you operate with, the green cover and the job generation, direct and indirect, that this process offers. Rate them, quantify them. Similarly, in terms of profit, look at capital intensity, Look at threats, alternative materials and applications which may make your product redundant, margins, and of course, resource consumption as a whole. Now, what we have been doing is any process that I have to rate, I try to define a score. I try to define a score, try to quantify. In fact, you may say that not all these factors are equally important, and therefore I can actually use weighted numbers for the sustainability score. Once you have these, how does it help? Number one is you know what is the environment, what is the sustainability impact of your process and product. The area here is the sustainability impact out of 100, the out of the total area. Anything that you do to improve your score will definitely help, and you can actually use it as a structured approach, that is working on each of these separately rather than talking about sustainability as a whole. You can look at opportunities, you can look at threats. For example, I know that in case of some of the product that I work with, environmental impact was so high that it became a big risk, and I know that the plants closed down. Look at opportunities. Like as I said, aluminium. There is a company subsidiary of Hindalco which found the recycle of aluminium so beneficial that they have decided to improve it to 100%, to make it totally circular. Once you have these ideas, use technology and convert this into action plans. The overall sustainability score of your processes or your products defines your ability to take on this challenge of sustainability. And this is available as a tool with me for improving processes. In fact, what we have been trying to do now is, rather than looking at only overall processes, looking at sub processes, the building blocks of your process, and make each of them sustainable, because it gives you ability to drill down. What are my learnings from this? See, the pressure on sustainability at one time, I know that my seniors used to say that sustainability is a fad. You know, it will be there today, it will go away tomorrow, because of whatever the thinking was. The pressure on sustainability on manufacturing today is imperative. It is going to be there whether you like it or not. So live with it. Convert opportunity, identify opportunity in this challenge. And as I said, there are ample opportunities that you can identify in each of the processes. Question the status quo. Focus on the quality of the process, not only quality of products. Work out sustainability impact score for each process or sub process. Make it quantitative, make it dynamic. For example, what we did in this case was we plotted a similar map on the same plot for some of the competitors, and we realized that there were areas where they were better, and then we know what to do. You know that there are areas where you are superior. You can actually use this for a project, the project sustainability project portfolio design. Rate plants, sites, processes, sub-processes, even equipment by their sustainability scores. This gives you insights for action. And then drive to improve this score through technology as a tool. Impact on quality of processes and product will come when you focus on, when you take this approach. So in my view, quality and sustainability are like two sides of the same work. One important point is, generally by quality people mean quality of product. This gives you an approach to focus on quality of process in a quantitative way. And I may want to request QFI. There may be no better platform than QFI to drive this further. Thank you. Over to Shiva.
Yeah. Unmute. Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni. Thank you very much. Uh, we'll take the question answer at the end. I hope it's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the time is short. So, as a marketing professional, I had learned 4 P's of marketing. Today, I learned the 3 P's of sustainability. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. The next speaker, let me introduce the next speaker, and he is Mr. L. Bhargav. Mr. L. Bhargav is the sustainability practitioner with an advanced specialization post-graduation in natural resource management and sustainable development. He has around 10 years overall experience and has worked on advisory and assurance of sustainable report and integrated reports across various industries. He has played a role of a lead verifier, project manager, and team member in several engagements related to verification of sustainability reports, greenhouse gas emissions, waste baseline assessment, second party assessment, carbon disclosure, water footprint, water balance assessment, supplier sustainability assessment, and Alliance for Water Stewardship certification, etc. His current responsibility includes verification of sustainability and non-financial disclosures, verification of greenhouse gas emissions, including ISO 14064 WRI protocol, carbon neutrality projects, water footprint assessment and AWS certifications, water balance map and indices, watershed assessment, extended product responsibility assessment, second party protocol assessment, assurance of sustainability based project, providing solutions to sustainable supply chains, design of supplier sustainability protocols, and supplier assessment. Let's welcome Mr. Bhargav to talk about the sustainability. Welcome, Mr. Bhargav.
Thank you, Mr. Shivkumar, for the introduction, and good evening to all the panel of Quality Forum, as well the audience who is participating in this call. So I think I'll just brief about what I'm going to present today and what is the basic agenda for my presentation. So as Mr. Shivraj rightly said, I am representing DNV for the present discussion what I'm going to do. So the main topic for today, what I'm going to present is on the carbon negative and water positive approach. So this is little niche topics where majority of industries and even at board level, the declarations are happening. So primarily, I'll just touch upon the core concepts of both the topics and some of the case examples. So I'll take around 10-15 minutes to brief out the concepts. Then I'll just take another 5 minutes of the case studies related to both the topics. So as I think most of the members from industries, you very well know, these are very vast topics if you go in details, and also a debatable concepts to deal with. So I'll be mainly on touching upon the management overview of carbon negative and water positive part. So as I'm representing DNV, I think most of you already know that DNV is an business assurance company as well as a certification body. So since it is established and since more than 160 plus years, head office is Oslo, and in India we have around all the presence overall at the country, and 300 global offices and 11,800 professionals. So that is a brief what I would like to touch upon about BMB. So coming to the sustainability journey of industries, I think most of them in the audience, they have vast experience working with the industry since a many decades. So everyone can correlate and connect to this slide as we see since a few decades back, the sustainability is very limited to the compliance related to regulatory or by any investor or the shareholders or by the organizational commitments. It's only limited to the compliance part. So then at some of the stages where the companies adopted the risk assessment approach, identifying what is a highly matters for the organization and which can impact the organization and which are the topics the organizations need to focus more upon more than just at the plant level, gradually to the group level or the corporate level. So then to the identified critical topics where they really needs to work upon, the organization started defining the management approach and management systems, how to handle those issues or which can impact the organization. So those indicators, the company started preparing the management approaches. So slowly, gradually, when the maturity of sustainability has grown up, the companies and the industry started defining their targets and goals, defining individual policies. Rather, before we can see majorly there is a common environmental policy. Now we can see every specific indicator in environment or social, there is a separate policy defined down. And it's clearly the policy covers the targets, goals, what is the vision, how they are going to see. Suppose a water policy. So what is the targets they are defining for a particular year, like 10% freshwater reduction by next 5 years down the line, or improve in the recycle reuse, like around 80% of efficiencies by so and so timelines. Like that, more targets and goals are specified by the companies for very critical indicators where the company is more concerned upon. So then the company started disclosing. So we can see there is a large trend of sustainability report and sustainability performance disclosures coming out. Now some are getting mandatory after SEBI has released on the BRSR. Before BRR used to be there. Now BRSR more on the ESG performance on the governance part. So more on the disclosures, it is implemented. More on the disclosures, the stress is going upon, and then the company started disclosing their best practices. So at multiple peers, at the comparison to the peers or at the group level competitions, they started disclosing the best practices, how they're handling and how they are maintaining or bringing out the positive outcomes from their whole management approach they have adopted on. And then some of the companies are in who are having the maturity level of more than decades or years in doing the activities related to specific indicators, are driving towards stewardship. Not only they're leading at the operational boundary level, but also to the complete beyond the fence or the beyond the operational boundary of their organization or the plant. So this is the overall, from our understanding, this is the overall sustainability journey what the companies are having right now. And most of them right now, they are disclosing what their performance as well, what are the specific stewardship initiatives they are taking. So right now our upcover, like the topic what we are going, sorry, there is some, yeah, sorry, there is some shift in slides. So the topics what we are going to discuss, that is on carbon negative and water neutral or water positive, are the outcomes of the phase from targets and goals on specific indicators to stewardship. So we can see now many companies from just being a water management companies They are being a water steward companies as well, from just a carbon management or just who has estimated their GHG footprint are right now in carbon neutral or having a net zero commitment, so based on SBTi or whatever the target based commitments they have. So the whole presentation starts from the phase of target settings and the disclosures they are doing on the sustainability performance. So to start with, on the carbon, as we see, carbon is one of the hot topic or most burning topic or most disclosed topic since last many years, since the clean CDM times as well, the recent times, whatever the commitments given at the COP 26 on net zero commitment by India as well other countries. So primarily, I thought I'll just run through what is carbon management before going to what is carbon neutral, what is carbon positive, or what is carbon negative or net zero. So carbon management, everyone, most of the industries, like I can say B and C tier companies or industries, they feel inventorization is a step where they can inventorize the emissions, and whatever the emissions are there, they can offset them through purchase of CERs. That makes them carbon neutral. So that is the most of the company's perception, as we have personally involved in assurance of GHG inventorization or carbon neutrality projects. So baseline we can see here in the hierarchy. So first and foremost step is before going for any reduction, it is on the inventorization of whatever the GHG emissions they are going to account for, as well the establishment of baseline where they need to work in reducing, replacing, and neutralizing. So establishing baseline is one of the crucial steps for the complete carbon management, which is an hidden iceberg for this hierarchy, what I am projecting right now. So once the baseline is established and the inventorization has been taken place, so first and foremost, before going to offsetting, the companies needs to strive or need to work on reduction of their energy consumptions and their fuel consumptions, which are the primary source of their emissions. And if required, based on the equipment's efficiency on fuel consumption or energy consumption, retrofitting needs can be taken up, or the redesign of products and services. At some of the cases, there are instances where the companies have taken up the redesign of the complete product, where it can cause a intensive or high level of scope 1 or scope 1 emissions, which can take place in the phase of production. So these are some of the steps where the reduction can be taken place, where the reduction reduced stage, there will be a significant reduction of emissions. And post that, if there is no possibility of reducing the emissions, then the replace phase will occur, where they depend on other sources of energy instead of the fossil fuel burnt energy sources. So dependency on green energy or renewable energy sources, and also adoption of clean tech or having alternative fuels. So we can see most of the companies right now or industries who run with furnace oil are replacing with biomass or biofuel. So that is creating it also creates the part of GHG emissions, but not in the significance or intensity as it is as a furnace oil usage. So the replace is in the second phase. So reduce and replace should be the first priority of any industry. Then comes the last phase of neutralization, where there is no possibility to avoid emissions, and there is only way that I can't balance my emissions or I can't reduce further. Then the companies are suggested to have the purchase of offset through CRs, that is the carbon credits through voluntary markets or the issuance agencies. Then offset with other initiatives what they can take like carbon sinks and all. So that is the overall phase of the carbon management where even from DNV when we assess or do the assurance or verification on carbon part, we suggest or we verify based on the initiatives they have taken on the first 2 R's, that is reduce and replace. Then the remaining wherever they can't do further or they can't avoid emitting from the sources or the design of their operations. So there we evaluate the CERs what they purchase. So that is the overall on the carbon management. So this established the most of the theories of carbon neutrality or net zero are carbon negative. So we can see from this slide, this is a snapshot from one of the BBC article. So the commitment, present commitment taken on net zero, India net zero by 2017. So we can see like most of us still has a little understanding points on what is carbon neutral, what is carbon negative, and what is net zero. So India has committed net zero, and China has committed carbon neutrality for 2060, and EU and US has committed for net zero by 2050. So these are some of the commitments, and we can see every country has a different level of commitment. So net zero is one of the new topics, or I can say existing old topic, but came into more in limelight in the recent years. So coming to the net zero is something that I am as an organization or as an institution or as an industry, I am doing the emissions. So I need to, whatever I am emitting into the atmosphere, I'm taking initiatives to remove from the atmosphere. So that in a simple terms or in a simple definition terms, that is what net zero really means. So neutrality has possibility for purchasing offsets or just balancing it out. But net zero is bringing out to zero to what I am emitting through the removal mechanisms. So there are many removal mechanisms which are theoretical long before, and few got very highly implemented, and some traditional practices which are highly effective in Indian scenario also, like some of the carbon sinks through forestation or the plantation activities, and CCS, carbon capture and storage, which is highly effective method of storing the carbon and utilizing it in a different form. And also CCS has many other methods like algae harvesting through CO2 pumping out of or carrying from the industry to the algae plants, or having algae plant inside the operational boundary. So there are many mechanisms for carbon sinks, but there is a big challenge right now for the Indian scenario of estimating or inventorizing those sinks. How like many industries where we are also working upon for the assurance assignments. So we see they have a lot of plantation programs. Sorry, excuse me, I may cough in between because of the health issue, but I'll try to minimize on that. We can see many of the industries right now having challenges. They have a huge plantation program, but they don't quantify how much is my carbon sink, what is my carbon sequestration. So what species I have, I know, but when it is planted, or what is the trunk, how is the biomass estimation, and how much is the actual sequestration happening from the plantation program, is some of the gray areas where industries are still maturing right now. So that is one of the steps where the net zero commitment is little challenging for the industries, what they are working right now. And we have already referred what is carbon neutral, and coming to carbon negative. So we can see many of the boards, like big companies like Microsoft and many companies at board level, they are announcing that we are going to be a carbon negative by so and so year, or we are already carbon negative, or we are right now carbon neutral and traveling towards or driving towards carbon negative. So what is carbon negative? So carbon negative is little more mature term compared to carbon neutral and net zero, where I'm as an organization or an institution or as an actor, I'm emitting or I'm having an emissions, overall emissions of X quantity, and my removals and offsets. So it's not only just purchasing of CERs, but my removals and offsets are much beyond or above my emissions what I am releasing into atmosphere. So that is a little much beyond these two commitments, where their activities are having high significance towards the removals than just balancing it out. So some companies, I think Microsoft has given for 2070, and many tech companies are coming forward in declaring their commitment toward not only net zero but also on the carbon negative. So in carbon, these three are the some of the major claims or major topics what the organizations at the group level are and at the industry level are working upon. So presently, one of the standard, I think most of the concepts or claims what we are discussing today have very limited standards availability or in place to refer and do. But everyone, most of them are going with this bespoke methodologies or as per their industry best practices. They're trying to make the claims, but presently, based on the demand and the commitments done by the all the major giants and the number of organizations. So SBTI has came up SBTI, the science-based targets, has come up with the net zero standards in October 2021. So still the standard need to be lively applied or worked upon, so that the results, whether the net zero can be achieved based on the baseline scenario, can be observed. But right now, this is the available standard on net zero. So it is mainly talking on how the removals and abatement measures are taken down the line from the short-term, medium-term, or long-term targets compared by the company, committed by the company. So in that line, you can see on the right side of the slide, you can see the key elements of net zero standard. So 5 to 10 years down the line and 2050 down the line, how you can see the down removal side, how the removals need to be increased and decrease in my overall emission load or emission intensity, I can say, rather emission load. So this standard is presently available, and I think it is in the stage of implementation. And this is one snapshot which I thought I can present you as a case study on carbon neutrality part. So this is a public disclosure which is available in Marico's sustainability report, which is been assured and verified by us by DNVGL. So because we have assured and as well most of the information what I'm going to explain right now is a publicly available information, so there is no confidentiality point in this. So wherever publicly disclosed, I'm going to explain through this case study. So this is for Perundurai, that is Marico is an oil company, oil manufacturing company. So Perundurai is an edible oil manufacturing facility, where they had a baseline scenario of 2016 to 2017, and that is in the peak of their operations. And then they fixed the baseline and they worked upon the carbon neutrality process, where they adopted the same hierarchy, where first they planned for the reduction measures and replacement of the existing energy consumption and fuel consumption sources. And they kept a strong mechanism, had a proper SOPs in defining how to monitor the reductions in energy and fuel consumptions and how to monitor the emission trends from year on year. And they came up with the complete reduction plan and proper SOPs for their carbon management, and got assured in 2019, 20, and 2021 two reporting cycles. And they planned initially for carbon negative because they have a huge carbon sink, which is completely owned and maintained by Marico. But due to unavailability of some of the estimations and information related to carbon sink, how much CO2 is being sink or sequestrated from the plantation program or the species. So that was kept on hold, but they went on with the carbon neutrality concept, where the information is disclosed on how much is the total scope 1, scope 2 emissions, and how much is the CR purchased, and how much is the reductions undertaken by the company. If you go to the sustainability report or the integrated report of Marico, the statement of a DNV clearly projects how much is the quantities of their scope 1, scope 2 emission and emission intensity, and what are the CERs purchased and how it has been balanced. So this is one of the case example where the efficiency is taken up regarding the neutralizing the emission load. So this is all about carbon, which I would like to highlight on the carbon negative part. And coming to water stewardship, I can say beyond water management inside the operational boundary, most of the companies are doing much beyond the fence. So where they are standing towards water stewardship than just a water management company. So latest, there is an international standard on water stewardship, that is AWS, Alliance for Water Stewardship. So I think ITC Kowai is the first unit in India who got certified in under platinum rating for the Alliance for Water Stewardship. So what is water stewardship? What is water balance? And what is just water management, water positive and water neutrality? I'll just go through 1 or 2 slides and explain you what is a concept and how it has been carried out. So this is some of the definitions in water stewardship. What is sustainable water balance and how water balance has been taken. So as per the DNV bespoke methodology, the water neutrality or water positivity is the outcomes of water balance index. So how the water debit and water credit is managed, based on that, the water positivity or water neutrality is being defined. So we can see in the highlighted definitions on the water stewardship regarding sustainable water balance. So I'll just brief out instead of spell the whole definition. So I define the catchment where I depended on, like every company works on, like they extract water or they pump out from a particular catchment where they depended on, like subsurface or surface layers, where they pump out the water and they depend on that water catchment. So as a sustainable water balance, if I'm extracting from a source, I need to give it back to the same source. It can be a subsurface or surface, where water is taken as a shared resource. It is not limited to one boundary. So I'm tapping a flowing boundary. So water flows, even though it is a subsurface or surface, I'm tapping the water, which is a shared resource to other communities or other stakeholders who are dependent on. So when I'm doing an activity of harvesting, or I'm doing an activity of giving back where I'm to the catchment where I'm dependent on, so there I call it as a sustainable water balance. So it's nothing but I'm just balancing my water debit and credit. So I'll explain what is water debit and credit in coming slides. And still water the certifiable standard which is available is only AWS, and there are other standards for water footprint like ISO 14046, which is a guidance standard, and ISO came up with ISO 46001. Sorry, correct me. I think it's on water efficiency management system 49001. One of the latest standard in 2019 has been released. So all are guidance standard, and there are multiple frameworks like CDP CDP water disclosures as well, CO water mandate, and water task force are some of the concepts and frameworks which are available. But standard specific AWS is one of the standard which is talking beyond just water management at the site premises or at the operational boundary of the plant. So this is one of the bespoke methodology or DNV bespoke methodology where we are doing the verification or assurance activities, giving the verification statement or assurance statements to the operational plants on their water status, water balance status, whether they are water positive or water neutral organization. So the concept is divided into water debit and credit. Debit is the intake or the load or the water stress which is getting created at the catchment, and water credit is the offloading or recharging of water at the same catchment or the watershed. So that is the simplification of the whole concept. So we can see on the right side part of the table. So all the water withdrawal sources are considered as a debit, like the tanker water source or surface water source or municipal water source. Whatever the water source, fresh water intake is taken as debit. And other parts like the alternative sources of water where they are offloading the stress on natural resource or the fresh water sources, like recycle and reuse of water, or sometimes at some of the cases we can see a good practice by major industries that they have a huge STPs like 40 MLD or 60 MLD STPs installed for treating the city sewage water and using it for the purposes of plant operations. Like we can see some like Tata Steel, or we can see HZL, Hindustan Zinc Limited. Some of the companies are doing in the major scale. Some are buying recycled water from the nearby SEZs or industrial parks and using those recycled water, qualifying to their water quality parameters for their water intake. And any water conservation plans, or mainly we see on the water credit based on the rainwater harvested and recharged. So we can see majority of as water stewardship plans or water management plans, majority of big corporates or the big size industries are having a lot of activities beyond the fence, that is the rainwater harvesting activities, which not only helping for the environmental, that is the rainwater getting recharged to subsurface aquifers, but also to the community use or the making availability of fresh water to the communities. So those parameters with the proper calculations or proper rationale in the actual rainwater harvested will be verified by DNV, and we have checked on the water credits. So we can see some of the, I'll just try to bring out some of the case examples where the size of rainwater harvesting structures or the type of rainwater harvesting structures are claimed for water credits. And you can see here how we have defined it. It's in a simple term, it is the credit divided by debit. If it is 1, it is neutral. It is above 1, it defines how many times water positive is the organization. So that's how the water balance index has been defined. I'm trying to simplify things for better understanding of all the audience. But when it is detailed down, there are multiple estimations and calculations of to bring out the water balance index. But to define in a simpler way, if I'm balancing that out from my debit and credit, so what I extract and what I give it back is equal, then it is neutral, and I give back more than what I extract is positive. So that's how the companies are claiming towards water positivity or water neutrality. So almost from my experience of 10 years working in sustainability assurance and assessment services, so almost more than 20 plus companies we have assured towards water balance index, and also we are getting multiple trying to work with multiple institutions to design the protocol for water balance index for the industrial associations and particular specific sectorial associations, not only India, also globally, like Lafarge Holcim for their complete all cement plants, they're having a water stewardship protocol coming out, even though they have one before. So from DNV, we are doing the same exercise for, I think, Ambuja Cements, who are working in water stewardship since last many decades. So we are in their journey for last 13 years, assuring or verifying their water balance index. So this is one of the case example what I would like to little highlight on by Hindustan Zinc Limited. So this is the snapshot from their sustainability report that the company claimed 5 times water positive.
Excuse me, Bhargav sir, there is a small request. We are falling short of time. Can you please conclude?
This is the last slide.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
If any audience is interested, we can go detail into the slide. Otherwise, this is one of the claim made by HZL on water positivity. So how they achieved is already explained in my previous slide on the index. So the water reduction measures and the rainwater harvesting activities they have taken up, and reduction in their water intake is, that is reducing their water debit, is one of the important or one of the success factor they have taken up in reaching 5 times water positive. So you can always go through their sustainability reports explaining their journey, how they reached water positive or water stewardship. So if any points of Q&A or any clarities or details, you're free to ask. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, over to you, Mr. Shivkumar. I think I'm done with my slide. So any Q&A from the participants again? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Elements for human existence. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can email it to us and we'll get it answered from the respective speakers. I thank you all for participating and making this event a grand success. Thank you very much and keep supporting Quality Forum. Thank you.